Welcome to Just a Farm Wife with your host, Tara Emerson. Tara is a farm wife, photographer, mom, podcaster, author, public speaker, and much more. On this podcast, Tara takes listeners on a journey through all aspects of life and how we can create future growth. This podcast helps to empower women to believe they are more than the labeling that society hands them. And remember, you are never just in anything.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Just a Farm Wife. I'm your host, Tara Emerson, and today is part 2 of Trouble on the Family Farm. In the last episode, we talked about all the behaviors, not all the behaviors, but a lot of the behaviors leading up until where we are now. And we started talking about the settlement agreement and how hard it was to get. And now the rest of the episode, we're going to talk about where we are now and what we're facing going forward. I mean, even in the settlement agreement said it was supposed to close within 30 days, and it was signed on April 4th. Everything didn't get completed until August of 2023. So we spent all of those months of limbo and him harassing us and not holding up his side of the settlement agreement. So August comes, we finally get everything ready. I got a letter from my father-in-law saying that all his crop was hauled in and everything's done. I was like, great. And so we changed everything over as of that date, so that our new crop, because this is July, we start combining at the end of July. It was important for me to make sure that my father-in-law was no longer split at the vendor when we hauled in our crops, right? Because he did not farm anymore. He called this vendor and argued that this crop, this canola, was his, even though I had a letter stating that he was done. And so that vendor was like, well, you're saying one thing, he's saying another thing. We can't deal with this. We don't want to be liable, which is correct. I mean, that was incredibly smart on their end. And they were like, okay, well, now we have to sue the both of you because we have the funds. We're trying to give them to you, but we can't give it to you because one of you is going to sue us, right? And so that was his loophole. This vendor was dismissed, from this case because really it has nothing to do with the vendor at all. This is about my father-in-law's control over everything, and he lost control essentially because he retired. And so in all of this, our crop insurance agent came back to us and said, oh, you guys are short again. I said, oh, is it this amount? And he's like, yep. I said, I know exactly where that is. It's in court. And then he was like, oh, okay. Well, that's settled. I find it fascinating that we're being accused of stealing, but yet our crop insurance guy is like, hey, you guys didn't get paid what you were supposed to get paid for this crop. Well, doesn't that show you how we have been doing things correctly? So after we took over his land, we found out that we actually had 53% of the acreage, not the 50-50 that he claimed. All these years he was putting forth that, oh, well, I have the same as you. And it turns out he didn't. We had 53% of the acres and we were only being paid for 50% of them. And we had more expenses because we had 53% of the acres. We had more land rent, we had more crop insurance. So this 50-50 thing was really pulling us down. And even on crop insurance reporting and that sort of thing, like it brings our average yield down because we're only reporting 50%, not the 53 that we actually had. This explains why our crop insurance adjuster was like, hey, things aren't right here. You're missing this much and this much. Well, it's because we had more acreage and we weren't getting paid for it. And so now this brings us back to where we are currently, where he is suing us In this lawsuit, he has thrown out several accusations and is on top of that money that was directly from the vendor that is in question. And this is the loophole that was created so that he could sue us. He is suing us for more than that amount of money. However, that amount of money hasn't even been explained to anyone. No one knows how that number came about. It doesn't make any sense. So this lawsuit really brings us back to the settlement agreement that says that we can't sue each other. Like, it is a legally binding document. And him suing us, part of the settlement agreement was you can't sue each other and that there will be no final accounting done. Well, when you're suing someone for crop that you feel is owed to you, that's final accounting. That's part of final accounting. And every business, when one member retires or sells or whatever, there's final accounting to make sure that everything's tidied up before you exit. That is normal business behavior. That is not the behavior that we have been met with. When you really look at this whole story, we don't know the extent of the money that was taken over the lifetime of the partnership. And we were willing to let that go because the more time went on, the more money we found. So now going back to this and him trying to make himself the victim is just completely asinine and classic narcissist. And here we are just waiting for this court date because we all know that the court system does not move quickly. That's just the way it is. There isn't anything we can do about that. But in the meantime, he's doing everything he can so that we either give him that money or we just peter out. And that is also classic narcissist behavior. This behavior has been meant to hurt us in the meantime while he's awaiting his lawsuit, because this lawsuit for him is a soapbox to be the victim on, which is why he's trying to sabotage our business now. We did have one court date. We filed a preliminary injunction because in the settlement agreement, there was equipment that was not turned over to us. One item was sold, but it was all laid out in the settlement agreement. His attorney had a copy, we had a copy, and he's claiming that he never had a copy, which is curious to say the least. And this also brings us back to his behavior of how he's sabotaging us and my son. In his letters, he's saying that our son stole equipment. But that equipment that my son did want to purchase was in the settlement agreement. That equipment is actually ours. Like, our son had no business even purchasing it to begin with. Our son was just trying to keep the peace and, figure things out, right? In that preliminary injunction, the judge, it is a legal document from the judge. I think you can look it up. I have a copy of it, but it says that we won our argument for the validity of the settlement agreement and that all the equipment was in fact there. And that document is in fact legally binding because you signed it. You can't feign ignorance when you sign legal documents. If all the information isn't there or whatever it is you claim is wrong, that's your responsibility to take care of. It's not anybody else's responsibility. If you signed it, then that's what you're legally bound to. The judge did state that in all of the parameters that you need to meet a preliminary injunction, we would have won them all except for one, and that was irreparable harm. So we did not get granted the preliminary injunction because we could not prove that our farm wouldn't survive tomorrow without those couple pieces of equipment. That's okay. We did replace them And now we just have to wait for the judge to make her final determination about the settlement agreement and putting all of those things the way they were supposed to. Or she could also decide that the settlement agreement doesn't matter and that we're going to go through the full accounting and really get to the bottom of this. That's what we're doing. We're just waiting. But I just want our side of the story known, because their distorted versions are hurting our business and hurting two families' businesses. And to me, that is not acceptable on any level. I would have just sat back and said nothing and done nothing if this wasn't affecting our businesses. That is just crossing the line too far, especially when it's your own parents. I know that it is really hard for my husband to go through this. And there's a lot of things that have to be learned and a lot of things that have to be unlearned. When you grow up in a family like that, it's not easy. But it's when you grow up and you have your own family and you decide that you're going to make a change for them, that's when all of these things open up for you and you watch how you want your kids to be treated. And this is not one of them. We will never put our children through this, and they don't deserve to be put through it now. I just want to remind you that this account of our situation is just a brief conversation about everything that's happened to us in the last minimum 5 years, and it's just summing it up in a very short conversation. And we appreciate your kindness and compassion when listening to this. And there are some details of the story that we didn't tell just for our own healing and safety. We appreciate you listening to our story. Keep following along if you would like to hear more. And other exciting news is that you can check out my book, Jolene the Fluffy Cow. You can find it on Amazon, Last Chance Trading Post, Market Society, Silver Dawn Bookstore, and coming soon, Ferguson Bookstore. Thank you for listening to today's episode, and remember, you are never just an anything.